But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, the next time the like button is out of town, sneak into their house and prop open their refrigerator door, and then just leave. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. On the evening of July 25th, 2008, a 59-year-old man named Brian Thomas walked hand in hand with his wife Christine out of the restaurant where they had just had dinner. The couple was in this little village right on the coast of Wales, and where they were now walking outside of this restaurant was right along the water. And so as they did that, Brian found himself looking out over the sea, and he saw the reflection of the moon on the waves, and it was so beautiful. And then he turned to his wife, and she was so stunning. And so Brian finally just stopped and kind of just took in all this incredible beauty right in front of him, and he began smiling ear to ear, which was a big departure from how Brian had been feeling over the past few months, because Christine had recently had a big scare. She'd been told she might have cancer, and so she went in for all this testing, and then she and Brian had to wait for it to come back, and the wait was absolute torture. I mean, basically Brian and Christine were prepping themselves to find out Christine really did have cancer. But when the results did come back, it would turn out Christine did not have cancer, and so Christine was obviously hugely relieved, but it was actually Brian who was more relieved. It was like he suddenly saw he could lose his wife of 40 years, who he had raised a family with. I mean, this was like the most important person in Brian's life, but it was like he didn't fully appreciate that until he realized he could lose this really important person. And so now that Christine had a clean bill of health, Brian was committed to showering her with love and affection and taking her to restaurants and on vacations. And in fact, the reason they were actually in this village in Wales is because they were on one of Brian's many vacations for Christine. He had gone out and bought this little camper van, and they had driven it up to this part of Wales. And then after this vacation ended, Brian's plan was to use this camper to travel with his wife all over Great Britain. And so the couple had a really busy schedule coming up. But for right now, Brian was focused on just staying in the moment and enjoying this newfound happiness he was feeling. And so he and his wife would continue to just kind of walk along the water for a bit. And then finally, when they felt tired, they headed back to their camper, they went inside, they got in their bed, and they fell asleep. A little before 4 a.m., Brian suddenly woke up inside his camper. And so he sits upright and he looks around. You know, it's totally dark inside of there. He can't see anything. He doesn't really know why he just woke up. And he's trying to get his bearings. And then, as his eyes kind of begin to focus, he realizes there is a person standing inside of their camper right near the door. Basically 10-15 feet away from he and his wife is a person. And so Brian just froze, and he's staring at this person, hoping this is just a dream or something. But then this person, who appeared to be dressed in all black head to toe, began to move. And they began to move first to the left, and then towards the bed. And so Brian is still just frozen, thinking, is this real? Is this really happening? And then this person began climbing on the bed on the side where Christine was. And so Brian, without even thinking, just yelled out, "You bastard!" And he jumped off the bed at this guy and began choking them out. And the whole time Brian is screaming at this person, like, "What are you doing? Why are you here?" And this person is fighting back so hard, and Brian is just not letting go. It's like instinct is completely taken over, and then this person goes totally still and just dies. And Brian knows he killed them, but they came into his camper. Like, what do you expect? Brian would ultimately be the one who called the police, and just several minutes later they would show up. And when they got there, they would find Brian standing outside the camper hyperventilating. And then when they tried to get more information about what exactly had happened inside the camper, Brian basically couldn't explain it. It was like he was totally in shock. And so eventually one of the officers just went inside the camper, and there on the ground they would find a body. But it was not some attacker. It was Brian's wife. It would turn out Brian had a medical condition called somnambulism, which we know as sleepwalking. And at home, he would sleep in a different bed than his wife because he sleepwalked so much. But since they were on vacation in their camper, they had to sleep together because there was only one bed on board the camper. And so not long after Brian and Christine had fallen asleep together, Brian began having this really intense nightmare where he believed his wife was being attacked. And so Brian, in this nightmare, had to stop this person from hurting Christine. Except, because of his sleepwalking, he acted this out in real life. And the attacker that he ultimately killed was ironically his wife. He basically tackled his wife and strangled her to death because he thought he was actually saving her. Brian was absolutely destroyed with grief and with guilt, and the second he realized what he had done, he confessed. He didn't in any way try to protect himself. He said, "I did this, take me in." And Brian would be arrested. However, in November of 2009, the judge who actually heard Brian's official confession, he kind of felt bad for Brian and said, "You know what, I'm dropping all charges against you because it's obvious to me you are a good and decent person. This was a mistake, and you're gonna live with grief and guilt for the rest of your life, and that's punishment enough." If you don't know this, late last year, we launched a brand new, strange, dark, and mysterious show called Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries. And so far, people love it. It is a free weekly show where each week we explore a new baffling mystery originating from the one place we all can't escape, our own bodies. Topics discussed on the show range from obscure diseases and freak occurrences to totally weird medical mishaps that sometimes result in big, amazing discoveries and other times result in just unimaginable suffering and death. So, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, then you really ought to give Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries a try. To start listening, go look up and follow Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries on any podcast platform, and boom, you're in. You got yourself a new weekly show. But if you're super impatient, like I am, and you can't wait a whole week to get a new episode, well, with your Prime membership, you can watch batches of 8 episodes of Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries on Amazon Music. Also, on Amazon Music, there are no ads. And if all this was not enough to sell you on maybe giving the show a try, well, then stick around at the end of this video and I'll play you a sneak peek from our newest episode of Mr. Ballen's Medical Mysteries.
白兰氏叶黄素豆，领先再升级，新添加智利酒果，水量舒适，强化型新上市，你也来试试。
还有日常保养款，2种选择，天天精亮。
One morning in January of 2016, a 45-year-old woman named Lauren walked into an office building in West Virginia where she worked as an office manager, and she dropped her purse, her phone, and her cigarettes on her desk. It was a Friday, and so Lauren was in a really good mood because she was pumped about the weekend. The next day, Saturday, she and her husband Dan planned to go on this big hike together. They loved hiking, so that was going to be awesome. And then on Sunday, Lauren planned to stay home all day and cook one big meal because it had become a tradition in their family that on Sundays, Lauren and Dan's kids, they had 3 kids who were all grown up, they would come back home to their parents' house and they would have a big family meal together. And these dinners were definitely the highlight of the week for Lauren and for Dan because both of them were very family-centric. Lauren switched on her computer and then looked at her schedule and saw she had a whole bunch of meetings back to back to back that day. And so immediately she was worried that she would not be able to slip out that day and go for a quick walk, something she had recently been doing a lot of because her doctor had recently told her that she had a blood circulation disorder that was called peripheral vascular disease. And what that meant was the arteries that carried the blood from her heart down to her legs and her feet were becoming blocked, and so her legs and feet were not getting enough oxygen. So far, her only symptoms were the occasional leg cramp, but if the disease got worse, it could lead to pain and mobility issues, and also heart attack and stroke. Luckily, Lauren's doctor told her that she didn't need medication, she just needed to quit smoking, change her diet, and become more physically active. And Lauren had totally leaned into this and was being much more active and had changed her diet. She hadn't quit smoking yet, but she planned to. And so Lauren really felt like she was on the right track. And so as Lauren kind of began her day, going through her emails and thinking about when she's going to do this walk, her cell phone rang. When Lauren looked at the phone, she didn't recognize the number, so she decided to let it go to voicemail. And so Lauren forgot about her phone and just